Good morning, participants. I'm Professor Rita Kakkar. I've been teaching in the Department of Chemistry, University of Delhi, for the past 37 years, and I teach postgraduate classes. I teach quantum mechanics, spectroscopy, computational chemistry, and similar subjects. And today I'm going to speak about spectroscopy, and within spectroscopy, I'm going to talk about atomic spectroscopy. Why atomic spectroscopy? Because molecular spectroscopy is vast, and it will have different components like rotational, vibrational, Raman, and electronic spectroscopy, which is not possible in one lecture. Atomic spectroscopy is also the first topic I teach, because if you remember, the beginnings of quantum mechanics came from observations related to atomic spectroscopy. So it is always good to understand the history, and that is why the first portion of my lecture is going to deal with the history of atomic spectroscopy, and then we are going to talk about the earlier atomic theories in the second part of the lecture, and the third part of the lecture is going to be about the about our knowledge today, that is the quantum mechanical understanding of atomic spectroscopy. So let me begin with a brief history of atomic spectroscopy and the historical portion. And first, let us understand what we mean by spectroscopy. It is derived from a Latin word which means spectron, which means host or spirit, or the Greek similar, it is in Greek alphabet, to see. So, excuse me, in spectroscopy, you do not look directly at the molecule. You are not able to observe the molecule. But what you see is something which we can call the image of the molecule, something that tells us about the structure of that molecule or atom. It is a ghost or image of that atom. And so, in spectroscopy, we study the absorption and emission of electromagnetic radiation by atoms and molecules. And that means that in spectroscopy, we have to study both the electromagnetic radiation and the matter that we are dealing with, in this case, at atoms. So, why do we need to study spectroscopy? You will see that in any syllabus, there will be spectroscopy written in physical chemistry part of the syllabus, it will be there in the inorganic part, the organic part. Physical chemists will tell you the theories behind spectroscopy and how to interpret it. Inorganic will tell you how to take a live spectra, the spectra that they get, and relate to inorganic molecules, particularly complexes, and so on. And organic chemists will see how it is applied to organic molecules. In each case, it is used to characterize the molecules, because spectra tells us about the structure of the molecules. In atomic spectroscopy, it also tells us about the structures of the atoms. So it tells you about the internal structure of atoms and molecules. That is, you get to know about the electronic energy levels when you study the electronic UV visible spectra. Then you can get an idea, in case of molecules, about the molecular vibrations, stretching motions, bending motions, torsional motions, all of these, what are there. And in the case of molecules, again, rotations, the microwave spectra of molecules will give you the structures of the molecules, the atomic distances, geometries, and so on, and the isotopic masses, all of this. So, what are the uses? You can determine molecular structure, you can identify unknown molecules, particularly, for example, those in the near the in the stellar atmosphere, because you can't go there, but you can study the spectroscopy and see what are the molecules which are present there. You can even detect known molecules and determine their concentration. So once you have the spectrum of, say, nitrogen, somewhere you know that nitrogen atom is present there. Now, what is the history of optics and light studies? The Arabian scientist bin Al-Hazan, Ibn Al-Hazan, he has been credited as the father of optics. He wrote a book of optics which correctly explained and proved the modern theory of vision, and his experiments on optics greatly influenced later scientists. So he was one of the first people who studied optics, and his experiments included ones on lenses, mirrors, refraction, reflection, and the dispersion of light into its constituent colors. Much before Newton, he was doing all this. He studied the electromagnetic aspects of light and argued that rays of light are streams of energy particles traveling in straight lines. So, even before we talked about the particle nature of radiation, this scientist was doing all this. Then came the British friar Roger Bacon in 1214 to 1294. He again wrote a book called the Opus Majus in 1267. Its part 5 deals with optics, and part 6 experimental sciences, and he was able to explain the rainbow. Then, of course, we are all familiar with Newton's work. He was the first one to use the word spectrum, and he was there in the 17th and 18th century. And this is his own, the sketch made by him about his experiment. It had a hole, a collimator lens, a dispersion prism, a target to display the spectrum, and a second prism to recreate white light. So he was able um, to get the constituents of white light, the different colors, and then put them back again to get white light. Then there are two more scientists who did a great deal of work. One is Herschel in the 18th 19th century. In 1800, he used a thermometer to show that beyond the red, there is another region which we now call infrared, which has connection with heat. It is called the IR radiation. And then Ritter in 1776 to 1810, he was there in 1801. He showed that silver chloride blackened in when placed on the site of the violet area. That means there is some radiation beyond the violet, which is more energy than the violet part of the visible spectrum, and this is now known as UV radiation, the ultraviolet radiation. You see, at that time they did not have so many instruments, so all light that they understood was the visible light. These were the first two scientists who said that there is something beyond that. Then the solar spectrum, he detected dark lines, and of course, Fraunhofer is a very well known name, and he was able to get the solar spectrum and measure precisely 574 of the dark lines and what were their wavelengths. And this is his spectroscope that he used, and this is the spectrum he got. You see, it is very colorful. All the colors of the rainbow are there, starting with the violet to the red colors, and all the lines in these he was able to interpret them. And what was his instrument? It consisted of a diffraction grating which was able to split the lights. And um, he is the one who labeled them as A, B, C, D. In the case of sodium, the D1 and D2 lines are the ones which match with the emission spectrum of sodium, and these are called the D1 and D2 lines. And Kirchhoff, he laid the seeds of quantum theory. He gave laws of thermal radiation, and in 1859, and then he also observed the black body radiation, and this is the kind of um, spectra he got. And he was not able to explain, because till then it was thought that the lower wavelength, higher energy radiation is what is going to increase as you increase the temperature. But you see, it goes through a maximum and then goes down. So he was not able to understand it. He challenged everybody, can you explain this kind of curve that you get for black body radiation? But nobody in his time in 1859 was able to interpret it, until came Planck in 1901. He gave his quantum theory, and that is why we say both Kirchhoff who challenged everybody. But at that time, when he threw the challenge, Planck was just a 1 year old baby, and in 1858 he was born. So in 1859 he must have been around 1 year, and by 1901 he had given his quantum theory, which was just a mathematical necessity for him. He was able to explain these curves only by assuming his theory, and we know that that laid the foundations of quantum mechanics. And then Heisenberg also, has a very important role to play in quantum theory. So he was also, in 1901, by Planck, he was able to give an answer to Kirchhoff's observations. So these are the people between 1858, when Kirchhoff threw his challenge, 1859 onwards, these are the people who were there. 1865, Maxwell was able to give his four equations on electromagnetic radiation. He was the first one who recognized that light is a form of electromagnetic radiation, and it has an electric field and a magnetic field. And he gave four laws, four equations, which are called Maxwell's equations. And then in 1879, you've heard of Stephen Boltzmann's law, and he also studied these spectra and gave his law. 1884, Boltzmann, he proved Stephen's law. That is why it is called the Stephen-Boltzmann law. Wien's displacement law also had a relationship between the wavelength and the temperature. And then Planck was the one who was able to give his atomic theory, and it is called the Planck's radiation law, and it came in 1918. Now, cosmic background data was studied by, and two of the scientists, two physicists. They obtained they were awarded the Nobel Prize in 2006, so recent as 2006. And they modeled the cosmic background data, and they were able to find a correspondence between the model and the experimental spectrum that was obtained. This is what they had modeled, and this is similar to the experimental spectrum that was obtained. So this was considered very important because these two scientists got the Nobel Prize for it. Now, what is a black body? We keep on talking about black body. What does it mean? Suppose you take any material, and I mean, the easiest way to think of a black body is something. You take a material and make a cavity in it, that could be round, any shape, anything, and just make a very tiny hole so that light can go in. Now, because it is difficult for light to come out, it will be reflected many times inside the cavity, and then you observe uh, what is the radiation that is coming out. So most of the radiation is absorbed by the walls of the cavity, and this causes a heating of the cavity walls because it is absorbing radiation. Radiation is energy. And what happens? Atoms in the walls of the cavity will vibrate at frequencies. This is what Planck said, that they will be vibrating at frequencies because they're getting energy. They will start vibrating, and each vibration is characteristic of the temperature of the walls, not on the material but on the temperature of the walls. These atoms then re-radiate the energy at the new characteristic frequency. So you understand what the black body radiation, as Planck explained it, or otherwise it was thought, it is a cavity in some material, and this has a very small hole which allows light to pass in. Once light comes in, electromagnetic radiation comes in, then it is reflected many times in the walls uh, of the cavity, because there is only one hole for it to go until it finally, and when it is absorbed by the walls of the cavity, the atoms there start vibrating, and they start emitting radiation, which is then emitted by the cavity. So now, Planck, what he proposed was that these vibrations are, the cavity has the material of the cavity has certain characteristic frequencies, and because of that there are energy levels. First time quantization, that the energy of the lowest level he said was zero, which we know is incorrect because there's a 0 point energy. And they are equally spaced. The next one has an energy equal to h nu, then 2h nu, 3h nu, and transitions can take place only between two energy levels with an energy difference of delta E will be h nu. From 0 to h nu it will be h nu to 2 h nu also. So are these transitions can take place, and in higher energy levels the molecule starts vibrating faster. So the energy is absorbed, so it goes to a higher energy level, it starts vibrating faster. Now this quantization, that energy cannot be 1.5 h nu, it can only be 1 h nu or 2 h nu or 3 h nu, an integral multiple of a new constant h, and nu is the frequency. So this was the first time somebody spoke about quantization. And then came Einstein, who never believed in the quantum theory, but he was forced to believe because when he did the his studies on the photoelectric effect, he also got the Nobel Prize in 1921, and he found that at no, he took some element which was able to emit electrons. So if you apply radiation to a sample, it will at some moment will have enough energy to lose an electron. So electrons will be emitted. What he found was, until you kept on increasing the frequency to a threshold level, no emission of electrons happened. But after going to a higher frequency than the threshold frequency, then the electrons started getting emitted. That meant that the radiation had energy which was quantized, because beyond mu naught, if I call mu naught as the threshold frequency, it did not have enough energy to cause the electron to be removed from that material. So that meant that even electromagnetic radiation, there was quantization. It was like a particle having some energy. If nu was the frequency of the radiation, then it had an energy equal to h nu. And if that h nu was greater than what we know as the ionization potential, ionization energy of that particular material, then it would cause emission of electrons. So this was a photoelectric effect that he was forced to believe that there has to be light also is quantized, and each quantum of light has an energy equal to h nu. It is like a particle, and this word, this photon word, was coined by G.N. Lewis. He said this electromagnetic radiation, which has an frequency of nu, is like a photon, like a particle which has an energy equal to h nu, which is quantized. So again, we look at the timeline from 1893 onwards. In 1927, Davidson and Germer, they performed an experiment which led to electron diffraction. What did it mean? That electron, if it can diffract, that means that it is behaving like a wave. Electron we think of as a particle, but this was the first experiment that displayed that it could behave like a wave because it could cause diffraction. Because we learn about diffraction, interference, and all when we are studying waves. So the world till then was divided into two parts. Either something was a wave or it was a particle. You go to a pond and you see the water waves, these are the waves, or sound is like a wave. But if something is a particle, anything is a particle, so it is a particle. But now we realize that electron is a particle, but it can also behave like a wave. It has dual character. Then in 1928, the first time Heisenberg gave his matrix mechanics, which also led to quantum mechanics. See, we are talking about spectroscopy, but we are led to quantum mechanics because you cannot understand spectroscopy without understanding quantum mechanics. So this was done in 1932. He got the Nobel Prize. In 1926, Schrödinger independent of Heisenberg, gave his wave mechanics, which was not matrix mechanics, but it was based on wave mechanics. And he also got the Nobel Prize in 1933. So very closely people were working. One person independently, Heisenberg, was working on matrix mechanics, and another person, Schrodinger. We still follow Schrodinger's wave mechanics, but Heisenberg's matrix mechanics is also very, very important. They both give the same result. It becomes a little tedious to solve matrix equations, so most of the time people do the wave mechanics, which is differential equations, and that is Schrodinger's solution. In 19 see very recent 19 Wien's displacement law was in 1911. He got the Nobel Prize, and this was given in 1893. And 1932, von Neumann, he also talked about operator algebra, which also led to quantum mechanics. So all these things were happening simultaneously, and now we look at a picture which is quoted as being, so much, lots of IQ in one. It has all the scientists, Einstein, Bohr, everybody was there, and in this picture, and this is a very well acclaimed picture. And there was a 1927, there was a fifth Solvay conference on electrons and photons. So it was on electrons. Dual character was very important. So we'll finish this lecture here, and in the next lecture we'll talk about atomic theories, and we'll be dealing with atomic theories, and then in the lecture after that we'll talk about the quantum mechanical theories and Schrodinger's wave equation and how we can interpret it. And thank you.